rhythm, isn't it? On page 2, now that the autumn leaves have fallen, and we bring in the Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shalom Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova, all the myriad of greetings that we might give one another at this time of year. It's so wonderful to have you all joining us, whether you're here in the sanctuary with us or joining us through the internet. For those of you in person, you'll notice we are using a different prayer book than you might be used to. This is the prayer book Mishkan Halev, which is as you can see, the prayer book for the month of Elul, which has been preceding the High Holy Days to this point. We used it a couple of weeks ago for our service of Slichot, when we changed the covers of our Torot from their standard colored ones throughout the year to the white for the High Holy Days. And since this is still within the High Holy Day season, we will again use this prayer book to bring that spirit to this Shabbat. And so the page numbers will be different, but we will call them out as Cantor did for Yedid Nefesh, and we will begin with our candle lighting on page 10. As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we by our lives give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. And now on page 12, those of you in the congregation, if you may stand. Those of you online, if you have your prayer books, it's on page 123. We will not be calling concurrent pages with the Mishkan Tefillah for those of you online. So you'll have to trust us that the service will be going in its proper order, just different pages. So on page 12, we will sing together the Kiddushat Hayom, otherwise known as the Shabbat Kiddush. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodesho be'ahavav ratzon inechilanu zikaron lema'aseh Bereshit ki hu yom techilo mikro kodesh zecher letziot mitzrayim kivanu v'kolta ve'otanu kirashta mikol ha'amin v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'veratzon hinechaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh HaShabbat. A Shabbat Shalom to all of you, L'chaim. Please be seated. And good Shabbos, Murray.
And so, in addition to using a different prayer book this evening, the Shabbat, we're also going to try something a little bit different in place of our Devar Torah, in place of the Drash, in place of the sermon, which we would often give at this moment. This evening, we're going to try an Ask the Clergy session, so that as you all are here today, you have all three of us here, and actually we have an extra clergy member with us as well, of course. And so we're bringing all of this knowledge, and I know as Jews, as the people of Israel who wrestle with God, whose jobs is to ask questions, we want to be here to try to answer those questions. Of course, since we are clergy, since we are rabbis and cantors, that answer might also involve a question, but we'll get to that a little bit later. We'll do this after our silent prayer, before we move into the concluding prayers of the service of the Aleinu. So, as we go through the service, if you're thinking of a question, try to remember it, because this is your opportunity to ask. Of course, there are lots of other opportunities, of course, as well. Torah study, so many different times. But let's continue with our service. We are on page 22 for Lecha Dodi.
Likrat kala b'nei Shabbat, lekava lekala lecha dodi. Likrat kala b'nei Shabbat, lekava lekala shamor v'zahor v'dibur echad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet b'ritzilah echad odi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat lekava lekava echad odi Likrat kala b'nei Shabbat, lekava lekava, likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelecha, ki lekol haveracha, merosh mikedem esucha. Shabbat Techila. Please stand. Face the back. Lecha Dodi. Likrat Kala, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat. Likapa, Likapa, Lecha Dodi. Likrat Kala, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat. Likapa, Likapa. Boi v'shalom, Ateret ba'ala, Gam v'simcha u'v'tzola. Toch emunei am sikula, Bo'ichala. Face the ark. Lecha Dodi. Likrat Kala, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat. Legava, Legava, Lecha Dodi. Likrat Kala, Likrat Kala, B'nei Shabbat. Legava, Legava.
Page 26 for our call to worship, Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. HaMevorach, HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. We remain standing, and I see many of you are close with some people physically, and if you are comfortable and want to remain that way, fine. We will turn to page 32 as we reach the ending of this piece, because this is Shabbat Shuvah. This is the intermediate Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, our time of joy to our time of contemplation, introspection, and tshuva, if you will, on Yom Kippur. And this time, it's a time of reflection. And I think it's important for us at this time of reflection to listen to ourselves, listen to our hearts, and listen to those around you so that you can come to our Yom Kippur service ready to turn a page toward a better 5783. If you're lost, you feel afraid, and you don't know what to say, then listen to our God. Is there a question on your mind? Is the answer hard to find? Then listen to our God. Listen with all your heart and soul, and with all your might. Write them and learn them and teach them well, every morning and night. Close your eyes and listen. If you feel like moving to this music and swaying a little bit, it's okay to hold hands. Quiet yourself, there's nothing to say. Stop all the chatter that gets in the way, and listen to our God. When the wind and thunder finally disappears, there's still a voice that you will hear if you listen to our God. You can hear it from the top of the highest hill, or from the valley below. It can come from the edge of the universe. It can come from within your soul. Close your eyes and listen. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Malechuto Le'olam. Listen to our God. Listen to our God. Please be seated.
We turn to page 37. Following the Shema, we traditionally continue with the Verhafta. The Verhafta reminds us of all the things that we might do to show that we are listening, all the things that we might do to show our love for the divine. And among them, the most important are often those things we call mitzvot. And so on page 37, we read the reading responsively, "Be mindful of all my mitzvot and do them." In everything you do, the mitzvot go with you. If you build a house, there is this. When you build a new house, you shall make a protective barrier for your roof, so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone should fall from it. When you cross a threshold, there is this. Set these words upon your heart, inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. When you see an elder, there is this. Rise before the one whose head is white with age, and regard an elder with respect. If you hire a person to work for you, there is this. You shall not exploit your neighbor. You shall not keep a worker's wages with you overnight till morning. If you have dealings with a stranger, there is this. The stranger who dwells with you shall be like a citizen among you, and you shall love that person as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. When you engage in holy works, there is this. Everyone who excelled in ability and everyone whose spirits moved them came, bringing the eternal to their office. Even when you are just taking a walk, not occupied with anything, the mitzvot go with you, for there is this. Set these words upon your heart, speak of them on your way. On page 41, Eternal, watch over my small domain of light and shadow, though those few people who share my love and all others upon this earth that sometimes shakes with thunder and reverberates with lightning. Help us to live with fear and conquer rage. Heal the hate that makes us kill and covers the ground with this Red Sea that only you can part. So we may all walk through the wilderness to your realm of peace, where all men and women are one, and sing your blessed name. Mi Chamocha, page 40.
Mi Chamocha ba'elim Adonai, Mi Chamocha neda ba'kodesh, Nora te'ilot oseh feret, Malechutecha ra'u banecha, Okei hayam lifnei Moshe, Shel Miriam Zeri Anu Ve'anu Michamocha Ba'elim Adonai Michamocha Nedav No, no, Te'ilo, Oseh, Adonai, Yimlo, Le'olam, Va'ed.
Even as we pray of our freedom and look towards walking through the wilderness, we also take the time to ask God to watch over us in these moments, to protect us this evening and always. Hashkivenu, page 42.
Hashivenu Adonai Eloheinu L'shalom, L'shalom Le'ha'amidenu Shomreinu L'chayim Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shalomecha Ufros Aleinu Sukat Shalomecha Shelter us beneath your wings, oh Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, oh Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake when morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right.
As we ask God to watch over and protect us, so too do we in this moment promise to protect and keep and guard the gift that God has given us each and every week, this special day of rest, Shabbat. We sing Vishamru on page 46.
Vishamru B'nai Yisrael HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat V'dorotam b'ridolam Vishamru B'nai Yisrael HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat V'dorotam b'ridolam B'nai uvein B'nai Yisrael Oti le'olam Oti le'olam Vishamru B'nai Yisrael HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat V'dorotam b'ridolam Vishamru B'nai Yisrael HaShabbat La'asot et HaShabbat V'dorotam b'ridolam Ki sheishet yamim Asa Adonai את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם לריבונו. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם לריבונם. וביום השביעי שופט וינפש, שופט וינפש, שבת וינפש. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם לריבונם. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורותם לריבונם.
Peace comes with the sunset. Cool breezes erase the heat of the day. All things settle into stillness. Gentle song of crickets, moonrise, and the silence of night. Give us shelter in your presence. Bring peace to those who yearn for peace. Enfold us in your quiet, that our fears find rest in you. We turn to page 48, and we rise for the tefillah, the Amidah, our standing prayer.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi agi tehilatecha. Adonai, open my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Page 50. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor ve'Hanoro El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim Vekonei Hakol Vezocher Chasdei Avot Ve'imahot Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava Zokrenu L'chaim Melech Chofetz B'chaim V'chotvenu B'sefer HaChaim Lema'ancha Elohim Chaim Melech Ozer Umoshia Umagen Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham Ve'ezrat Sarah. Page 52. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechayeh HaKol Atah Rav LeHoshia Mohorid Hatal Mechalkel Chaim Bechesed Mechayeh HaKol Berachamim Rabim Zomech Nofrim Verofech Horim Umatir Asurim Umekayem Emunato Rishenei Afar Micha Mocha Baal Gevurot Umidom Eroch Melech Memit Umechayeh Umatz Miach Yeshua Micha Mocha El Harachamim Zocher Yitzurav Lechayim Berachamim Vene'eman Ata Lachayot HaKol Baruch Ata Adonai Mechayeh HaKol. Page 54. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh u'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalalu chasela Baruch Ata Adonai HaMelech HaKadosh. Please be seated.
And we continue now in our prayer books. We continue on page 69 as we pause at the end of this week, to think about what has been and to offer our gratitude and our thanks for this week. And for all of these gifts, for the gifts I received today, air in my lungs, pulse in my veins, my restless mind alive and curious, awakening suddenly to beauty, for love and the memory of love, forgiveness when I didn't deserve it, another chance at life. Let my soul give thanks to you. Let me not forget your kindness. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Blessed are you, Adonai, whose goodness deserves thanks and praise. And we turn to page 70. And together we will join in a prayer for peace. Peace, profound and lasting, all-embracing. Peace, let this be your gift to Israel, your people. In your goodness, author of peace, bless us and all people, every season, every hour, with the peace that is yours to give. Let us and the whole family of Israel be remembered and inscribed in the book of life. May it be a life of goodness, blessing, and prosperity. May it be a life of peace. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael bashalom. You, Adonai, are the blessed one who blesses us with peace. And now we turn our hearts and our thoughts toward those who are in need of healing. We'll turn to page 77. And this evening, as we think of those who are in need of healing, certainly we are thinking especially of our friends, our loved ones, those whom we know who are in Florida who have been affected by the hurricane. And this evening, if you are thinking of someone specific who is in need of healing and you would like to call their name aloud, sending their name into the universe toward God with our prayers this evening, I'm going to ask that you rise at this time. And together we will share their names. And we take those names into our hearts and into our prayers. And may God swiftly send them a renewal of body and spirit as together we join in singing Mishaberach, our prayer for healing.
Mishaberach avoteinu ekor haberacha. Of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us sing bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
And we take a moment for silent and personal prayer.
return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and born again. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu, Kedem. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again, return again, return again, return to the land of your soul.
Shabbat Shalom, and welcome. I'm Paul Kravitz, and I'm proud to be a member of the UH Board of Trustees. I have some announcements for you. Torah study begins at 9 a.m. tomorrow in the library or via Zoom. Our Shabbat morning service, our family Shabbat, begins at 10:30 in the sanctuary and by a live stream. Our Singing Bowls meditation with Maretta Shaw is at 11 a.m. in the youth lounge. And our upcoming services for Yom Kippur start off with Kol Nidre this coming Tuesday, October 4th at 7:30, followed the next day by our Yom Kippur services. At 9 a.m. is our children's service. At 10 a.m., the morning service. At 1:30 to 3:30, the Yom Kippur learning sessions. And at 4, the afternoon memorial and concluding services. Upcoming events include on October 2nd, memorial service at the UH Cemetery at 10 a.m. And help build the sukkah at UH at 11 a.m. Join us for Faith and Blue Shabbat as we take part in the National Faith and Blue Weekend on October 7th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And on Sunday, October 9th, is the Sukkot service in the UH parking lot via live stream and Facebook at 6:30 p.m. Be sure to come and see the new sukkah. For information on additional upcoming classes and programs, please visit the UH website. Thank you to our tech team for making it possible for all of us to be together virtually tonight. We appreciate you. The gift shop is open on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 12 to 3 p.m., Tuesdays and Thursdays, 9:30 to 3 p.m., and Sundays, 9 a.m. to 1, when religious school is in session or by appointment. Again, Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Paul. And I just want to add the Yom Kippur morning service at 10 a.m., that early memorial service is immediately following. That is still happening. That didn't get there. I don't want anybody thinking, they got rid of that service I like. It's there. Rabbi Reinhardt.
Wonderful. Well, Paul said a thank you to our tech team. I'm going to give an extra thank you because I threw them a bit of a curveball, because we're going to come off the bema for this opportunity to do a little bit of learning. One of the things that is wonderful about our services, one of the things that's wonderful about our worship experience is that although we often think of this as a moment of worship, of prayer, services in Jewish tradition have never been solely restricted to that one avenue. There's always been an element of learning involved in it. Prayer itself is meant to be educative. It's meant to instill in us learning and remind us of those things that are important. And so this evening, we wanted to open up to your questions, the questions that you might have on your mind. And what a time of year to be doing this for the first time. There are so many things that are happening, so many different pieces that we only get to experience once a year. So if you have a question, I invite you to raise your hand. And for those of you joining online, we'll repeat the question before answering so that you may hear it as well. And if you have a question that doesn't get answered this evening, send it our way in an email, and maybe the next time we do this, we can answer it then. Or if it's an urgent one, we'll answer it before then. Questions? Paul.
Thank you for taking our questions. We have a good turnout here tonight, but what if we didn't have a million? What if we didn't have 10 men here? Would we still hold the service, or would we go home?
That's a wonderful question. So the question was, we do have a wonderful turnout this evening for Shabbat Shuvah, but what if we didn't have a minyan? And a minyan can be interpreted in different ways. Paul, you posed the question of what it would happen if we did not have 10 men, which is the traditional way of counting a minyan. Traditional may not even be the most accurate word. It is the historic way of counting a minyan, but that might not be our tradition. I'm going to let one of my colleagues begin to answer this because I'm new to United Hebrew, so I want to make sure that we can also answer what would not just Jews do, but what would we do?
I'm happy to take this. So first I will say we count all people in our minyan if you are 13 and above. So if you are 13 and older, we count you in a minyan. That also being said, here at UH, if we didn't have 10 people, we would still do our service for those who were here. Occasionally, I will say on Shabbat mornings, we might have 2 to 3 people who join us in the sanctuary when there isn't a larger bar bat mitzvah service, and we do our service. While yes, there are some prayers that historically, traditionally are said when there is a community, a minyan, we still do that for the sake of those who came to our service, who often are coming sometimes because they need or want to say Kaddish, which is one of those prayers where historically one might need a minyan or a minyan, and so we would still do that. The only place where we might make a change would be that if it is a Shabbat morning or if it is a festival morning, we might not read from the Torah. A Torah does require us to have a community and have a minyan. You can have 9 people and the Torah can count as that person in the minyan. And so occasionally that will happen. It doesn't mean we just skip over. We will still discuss whatever the parasha is, or we will talk about it, but we might not read Torah. But we would never say, go home, we're not doing services, there aren't enough people here.
From a technological point of view, back in 2004, we were posting recordings of our services for people that were in nursing homes, hospitals, etc., that could watch it online. We then moved into streaming our services roughly around 2008, 2009. So we were uniquely positioned during this pandemic. We had a lot of equipment and a lot of ability to do this. That's why our live stream today is so sophisticated, because we've built on a technological foundation. But one of the cynical questions back in 2004, 2005 is, if nobody shows up, but you have 10 people watching on your computers, does that constitute a minion? The answer is yes. Yes, but no, you shouldn't leave your webcams here in the congregation and then go off to Rich and Charlie's and then come back and pick it up. Okay, that's not fair. But yes, we would count people. We wouldn't know, but we would count people in a minion, even if you were not here. That's why we were very comfortable during the pandemic to be very much alone in here, but knowing so many of you were watching in the services, you were our minion. It was not by your choice that you could not come here. Therefore, I think if you believe that God was going to get you for not participating in the minion, no, you're fine. The very same causes for us to be apart are very much the opportunities for us to be creative and to bring you closer to us. Next question.
Wonderful. Next question. Yes, Leslie.
Resurrection of the dead.
Yes, so the question was in the Amidah, particularly the giver wrote, why do we use the word hakol to give life versus hametim, who gives life to all as opposed to who gives life to the dead? And again, especially because this is a congregation-specific thing, I will again defer to my colleagues.
So it's both theological, and I will also say it's historical. So in the early Reform prayer books, the early Reformers writing the liturgy or putting the prayer books together, they were sort of retooling the liturgy, took out metim because there was this notion. So that is a reference to the notion of God's power to resurrect the dead. That is in one of Maimonides' principles of faith, that I believe that God has this power to resurrect the dead. And so the early Reformers theologically took that out and instead inserted the words hakol, that God can give life to all, as opposed to pointing to this other theological statement that was there. That hakol was in the Union Prayer Book, hakol was in Gates of Prayer, and it wasn't until we got to Mishkan Tefillah that the editors of Mishkan Tefillah, who are Reform rabbis of today, said, you know what? As Reform Jews, we are all across a large theological spectrum. Let's bring it back into our prayer book and give congregations and or congregants the opportunity to say either one. So historically in our congregation, we have always said hakol. Therefore, when we switched over to the prayer book, we stayed with hakol. However, for anybody who is coming into our congregation who may have grown up in a conservative congregation, an Orthodox or more traditional congregation, those words, mechaye hametim, are there, and so it allows us to pray with either one.
The amateurs of the Great Assembly, which meet on Thursday from 11:30 to 1 o'clock, are currently studying the book Bechol Levavacha, which takes us from primarily the Reformed liturgy, and we are doing a guided reading of the book. And right now, on page 141 of that book, we are starting the section that begins with the Amidah. In 2 weeks, not next week, because if else you want me to teach it by sign language, because it's the day after Yom Kippur, I'll be doing vocal rest, and they all said, no, we don't read sign language, so it's the following week. You're welcome to come to that session, because we are going to actually talk about that. We're going literally word by word through our liturgy and talking about the etiology, the historiography of the words, and why these words are chosen for us at this time. So, because it does beg a very large, very deep answer that we can't do up here on the Bima and give justice to it. But you're welcome to come, please. We have a great group, and we're studying that seriously.
In person or on Zoom.
Right. Just go on the website and see the link.
The one piece that I will add to this as well is, in addition to the theological diversity that Rabbi Rosenberg was talking about, beginning in the 70s and into the 80s, there was also a return to spirituality that happened in the Reform movement, which mirrored the larger return to spirituality of that time period across religions. And so one of the things that came out of that is also an openness to these more mystical practices that people often think of, which the resurrection of the dead fits into that understanding as well. And so actually, and I don't know what United Hebrew did here, but when I was growing up outside of Chicago, my congregation was one of the congregations that was given the early drafts of the Mishkan Tefillah. And in the very first drafts, it completely got rid of Hakol and only had Meitim as a trial to see how it went. And part of that goes back to, again, not just the theological diversity, but this return to spirituality. And so it wasn't meant as we believe that God will resurrect the dead at some point, but much more as the potential of bringing life back into those who have died, into this notion of the amazing power that God might have that spans life and death more in the metaphorical, mystical understanding. And as a result of that, actually, my parents' congregation now uses Meitim simply because that was what was in that early draft, and so they had started doing it. They kept doing it. More questions? Yes, Jessica. Sure, absolutely. So to kind of summarize the question, what are some of the large-scale theological overarching differences between the Reform movement and other more traditional movements, whether that's conservative or more likely even more modern Orthodox, and such other streams of Judaism? Was that correct in terms of the question? Wonderful. So, when are those instances? What are those? When are those moments? There are several differences. And again, part of the trickiness in answering this question is that we're also talking about something that exists in because I do like physics, what I will call the fourth dimension within a time. So the Reform movement of 100 years ago or 120 years ago, 150 years ago is not necessarily the Reform movement of today. And so some of those early things still impact us today, even if we might have more openness to it. And so some of the examples that we've already talked about is the resurrection of the dead. That's one major area that really falls under even more the category of what we mean when we talk about the Messiah. And within Judaism, when we talk about the more orthodox streams, the understanding is that the Messiah typically is thought of as an individual. An individual will come that brings on this thing called the Messianic Age, which involves all kinds of things, including the return of a heavenly Jerusalem and a new temple and a dawning of peace, at which point those who have died will be resurrected. That is a very traditional, very orthodox understanding of the Messianic time period. Within the Reform movements, the early Reformers and many Reform Jews today kind of reject that understanding of what the Messianic era really means. So first of all, the big thing is that mostly throughout the Reform movement, we don't talk about a Messiah. It's not that we think that some Messianic figure will suddenly appear and bring about this time period, but that we all as a community, as a world, are working towards that ideal of the Messianic age, working towards the goal of creating peace throughout the world. And so big pieces that fall under that category, again, are resurrection of the dead, early Reformers got rid of, a rebuilding of the temple. Early reformers said, not for us. All kinds of different things. Other things that you might want to add either in that or other areas where we would differ.
Kashrut.
Kashrut is a major one, absolutely.
However, there are also Reform Jews
Yes.
who keep kosher or keep some form of kashrut. So one of the things that we have to remember is that Reform Judaism isn't a monolith, that, even if we are members of the same congregation, there are going to be Jews here who have very differing ideas or practices in terms of whatever we grew up with or whatever feels meaningful to us. So one of the big pieces between another theological difference is that when you look at traditional Judaism, the idea is that God commanded us to do these mitzvot, and we do them because we were commanded by God. Whereas the early reformers said, no, these were inspired, they were divinely inspired, but this is all written by people, and so then it becomes a question of obligation, that it was given by God and not changed, or autonomy. And so is it that when you know the mitzvot, you've understand them, you've studied them, I choose to take this on for myself because, or I choose not to take this on for myself because. But yes, in today's world, I think it gets much, much harder because I do believe we're probably entering into a time where probably 20 years ago we would have said, no, no, no. But what people are sort of calling a post-denominational world, where Jews are finding themselves in all sorts of spaces and looking for those places that are comfortable to them and that speak to them. So I know people who are members of an Orthodox shul, a Reform shul, a conservative shul, and they go to those different places for whatever is most meaningful to them at the time. So it can become difficult to say where are they exactly different and then where are they similar. And even within Reform, we could all be different. At UH, we have second day Rosh Hashanah. If you look at some of the other Reform congregations in town, there isn't second day Rosh Hashanah. And so there are some differences in terms of that.
This Shabbat we'll be studying Parashat Vayakhel. It consists of one chapter. It is very deep, it is very dense, according to the Shabbat message that was out online. It's very deep and it's a very dense chapter. It's 30 sentences of chapter 31, which gives us the seed bed of what you are speaking, because people will look at this replacement, if you will, this replacement theory, if you will, of Joshua from Moses as a succession. And others will read it and say it's a progression. And that's really where it starts. Do you see, and you don't have to answer this, I mean, I can ask the question to everybody, do you see the movement between Moses and Joshua as a succession, or do you see it as a progression? And if you decide on which one of those, you can decide which way you basically look at the 10 Commandments or the 10 suggestions. It's really how one will interpret and live out these things. The laws are the same. However, the way in which we interpret them. In traditional Judaism, we have what are called hilchot, laws. The correlate to Reform Judaism are responsa. They are not hilchot. These are responsa. What are they responding to? They are responding to the social norms of the time and the flux. And they're constantly being revised within it. It's a living Talmud, if you will. So it's really a question of test of time. How long do you want to wait before you can progress forward on something? We all are Jews.
And the diversity of Judaism is something that has existed since Judaism existed. You look at the Talmud, it always preserves other opinions. It may not be the decision of that time, but it might be in the future. Always important to have that variety of decisions and discussions. We have time for one more question. David.
I was going to say, you were talking about return to spirituality within Judaism. I don't think spirituality ever left Judaism. If you look at our standard liturgy, there's a lot of spiritualism in prayers like L'cha Dodi, Adon Olam, Yedid Nefesh. of things we've done tonight. You know, years ago, there was a very interesting book called The Jew in the Lotus, written by a guy named Roger Kamenetz, which was an account of a meeting between the Dalai Lama and other, people at the higher end of the Buddhist tradition, and Orthodox and other non-Orthodox Jewish leaders. And they wanted to know what was the secret of our, the way we've survived with all the travails we've had. Of course, they had to deal with communist China taking over Nepal. I'm wondering who influenced who more. If you think about the Silk Road and the traders who moved from that part of the world in Asia through the Middle East, I think things got mixed up in ways that we're not really totally aware of yet, but that we had profound influences on one another. And because we're constantly evolving, and because we're constantly interacting with other aspects of the world and other traditions, it's still going on.
Right.
So your question is, what is at the core of our spirituality, the core of our neshama? Is that the question?
Well, I would say not so much what's at the core of it. I would say it would be the Shema. We have this concept of a single, all-powerful deity, however we may conceive of it. That's the only thing that...
So David, the question that I'm hearing from you, though, is more of what is the interplay between Judaism and those things that have existed around us throughout history? And there has been a lot. And so I alluded to that in our modern period with this notion of I use the term spirituality. And spirituality is, again, probably not the right term, but ritual in particular is one thing that has really come back into play in the Reform movement in a way that it wasn't 50, 70, 100 years ago. The early Reformers modeled much of the style of the Reform movement after what would be termed as high church Protestantism, in the sense that you went and you probably didn't wear a kippah, probably didn't wear a talit, you stood, you didn't daven, you were Germanic more in how the Reform movement was originally conceived, which makes sense historically because the Reform movement's origins go back to that area, to Germany, to Central Europe, and particularly the intellectual Jewish community of that time. One of the things that we've hinted at is, and it's a big word, and we're not going to dive into it too much, but if you have further questions, we're always here for more, is this notion of Wissenschaft des Judentums, which is the scientific study of Judaism. And so it's from that so many things have gotten drawn out. But if you look back, going back to history, and again, I love this subject because I studied anthropology in school. If you go back and you look at the origins of Judaism, you look at the stories in the Torah, there are similarities and comparisons that can be made to the literature of the ancient Near East of that time, of the surrounding peoples. There are shared thoughts. There's what you might term a cultural milieu in which the Judaism came about in that time period. And so throughout history, it's always been a balance of what do we go with the flow of that moment, and what are we going to hold from our history? It's always been this interplay, and it's something that I love to talk about. To me, it's always a process, not ever set.
Well, and I also think in terms of what Rabbi Reinhardt is saying is that as the changes came into the Reform movement, and we're talking about the Reform movement in the United States, we have to recognize that with the origins in Central Europe, we're here in the States with the influx of Jewish immigrants who were coming from Eastern Europe, who were coming from other places. Then they are bringing in, yes, many of them still Ashkenazi customs, but they're different. That's why this grandmother serves matzo ball soup this way, or this person does, this way. And then now we have to talk about what are the influences when we look at Mizrahi Jews, those Jews who are from Arab countries, who very much have cultural influences, and we might go sit in a Mizrahi synagogue and say, wow, that's totally different. Or if you've ever been in a Sephardic congregation, the pulpit, the bima, is in the center of the sanctuary, not at the front. So there are a lot of cultural differences. So even when we talk about spirituality, it's even bigger. And we can see that sometimes in the music that Cantor Eicher does, which is, a vast array of different styles of music that match some of the different cultural communities within Judaism.
How many people still have questions?
We-
No, I mean,
I do.
how many people, yeah, how many of you, not questions to ask us, how many of you came away from here with more questions than answers? Oh, some of us raise our hands like this. It's okay, raise your hands, because you're welcome. That's exactly what happens when you finish a study session with any of us. If you walk out with more questions than answers, that's part of being Jewish.
And we'll end this with a question for you because Rabbi Rosenberg brought it up. Matzah balls. Who likes them firmer? Who likes them softer? Wonderful. All kinds.
And sometimes they're not served in soup, they're served with gravy.
Yes.
So that is an old German thing that I learned once at another congregation. We turn to page 78 and we rise now for Aleinu.
Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. At the bottom of page 80 we continue. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
You may be seated. Our thoughts turn to loved ones whom death has taken from us in recent days, and those who died at this season in years past. Our hearts open as well to the wider circles of loss in our community and wherever grief touches the human family. This Shabbat, we are in the period of Shloshim for Robert Bob Balkin, Antoinette Rose Carley, Susan Fadum, Jerome David Friedman, Natalie Diane Ginsburg, Robert Bob Levy. This week, this Shabbat, we observe the yahrzeits and we lovingly remember Jack Martin Axelrod, Robert Bloomberg, Gussie Brownstein, Anna Carl, Sadie Ruth Cohn, Sophia Crystal, Clara Darish, Corinne B. Edelston, Martin M. Enoch, Harry Fagan, Hyman Feldman, Leon Feldman, Sarah Fishman, Harry Fishman, Jean Helen Friedman, Lulu M. Furfine, Herman V. Gibstein, Melvin Harris Glick, Mamie Goodman, Ruth Goodman, Lillian Hartman, Jerome Hofstein, Israel R. Hurwitz, Sylvia Litvak Jaffe, Anna K. Kaufman, Lily A. Cowan, Fanny Koski, Frida Cram, Samuel Kramer, Rita Krug, Sadie Lauder, Mayor Levy, William B. Levy, Ben Lux, Ernst J. Malpe, Malalma Merstein, Dora Pazlowski, Max Richmond, Dan S. Rodenberg, Bernice Jean Roman, Eileen Joan Rosenthal, Alice Sachs Rosenthal, Jacob Roven, Ann D. Salzman, David Schlesinger, Julia Schreiber, William Bill Siegel, Bessie Weissman Schenker, Joseph Shapiro, Stanley Stone, Ruth Stone, Lorraine Sussman, Clarice Warren, Alvin Weinberg, Lois M. Winthrop, Harry H. Zucker. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be a blessing now and always, as we turn to page 86 and we rise for the recitation of Kaddish Yatom. Yit gadal ve'yit kadash shemei rabbah, bi'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon uvyomechon, uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehe shemei rabba mevorach le'olam molmei almaya, yit barach ve'yishtabach ve'yitpa'ar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, v'yitalev, v'yitalal, shemei dekudashar barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram be'alma v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. And on this Shabbat, Shabbat Shuvah, this Shabbat of returning to ourselves, of returning to that right path, we think of the teshuvah, that returning that we need to do. But interestingly enough, as Cantor Eicher spoke about a responsa, another way that teshuvah is defined in our tradition, when somebody asks a question, a she'elah, the teshuvah is the answer. So if somebody is asking a halachic, an answer about halacha, about law, they're given a teshuvah, an answer. And so as we think about Shabbat Shuvah, it's also that time for us of perhaps asking questions and seeking the answers for ourselves that we need answered as we move into this new year. And we wish everybody a Gamar Chatima Tova, that at the end of this season, that we will all be sealed for good as we end tonight with a prayer of peace.
Oseh shalom bimromav, ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael ve'yimru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al shalom aleinu, ve'al kol